Yeah.
All right, we're about to go live. And hold on one second.
All right.
All right, darn it. Yeah, just out of nowhere said we violated their terms of service for some reason.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it'll hopefully figure it out. All right, here we go. We're good to go. I got it going now.
Cool.
All right. So today we're going to be talking to William Yancey, Dr. William Yancey. He is a historian of, what would you say, Reconstruction Texas, post Civil War Texas?
Uh, Secession, Civil War, basically Civil War era.
Okay, a little bit post Civil War because
Everything.
you got the book on Orin
Yeah.
Roberts coming out pretty soon.
Right.
So you want to talk about that before, as we're getting started with the game?
Oh yeah, just a little bit. Basically, what I study is pretty much everything. My wheelhouse is from 1848 to probably about 1890. So basically, from the end of the Mexican War up to about the populist movement. And my
Okay.
dissertation, a manuscript that's currently under review at LSU Press about a governor of Texas named Orin Roberts, who was involved in pretty much every important thing in mid 19th century Texas. He's a state Supreme Court judge on three different occasions. He is chairman of the Secession Convention. He's a Confederate colonel, 11th Texas Infantry Regiment, and then later on, 1878, gets elected governor. So it's it it's interesting in studying this one guy. You get pretty much through all the major movements, historical movements in the American South in the mid 19th century, because he's involved in all of it.
So was he? He was obviously the chairman of the secession convention. Was he was? Would you say he was a fire eater, like a guy that really wanted the war, or?
That's interesting. At first I portrayed him that way, and the more I got to looking at it and reading some secondary literature, I don't think so. I think Oren Roberts is. There's a lot of guys like him. He's this professional class in the South. He's a lawyer, a judge. He owned slaves, but I think at tops he owned maybe seven or eight, and that was more like a status symbol for him. I think a guy like Oren Roberts wants a strong national government because that's the only thing strong enough to protect slavery. And so up until about 1850, he's totally on board with the United States of America. But when he starts to see that the United States might not be a guarantor of slavery, then he starts looking somewhere else. And I think a lot of guys are. I think Jefferson Davis is like that. A lot of those guys are like that. So I wouldn't call him a fire eater in the sense that you would say a Robert Barnwell Red out of South Carolina or that other bastard William Yancey from Alabama.
Okay.
Um, he definitely by 1850 though he started to pretty much make up his mind. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look somewhere else.
Okay. We need a new government because this
Yeah,
this is a threat to my slavery. Basically.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you played Red Dead Redemption 2. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk about Red Dead Redemption 2. You basically look at the area that's supposed to be the South. Now that's obviously not really the South, but it's kind of
Right.
have this analog for the South. And I kind of want you to tell us what's real, what's not real, what's
Okay.
accurate and inaccurate, and things like that. So this is right here we're starting out at. This is the town of Rhodes. You played this game, so I'm kind of just
Yeah.
talking for the people that haven't played it yet. But this is meant to
Okay.
be, I'm guessing, like the traditional southern city. Would this be something like Georgia, Alabama, maybe?
I've always kind of pictured it as sort of like northern Louisiana because it's kind of close to Saint Denis, and Saint Denis clearly is supposed to be New Orleans, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'm thinking, to me, the terrain, the red dirt, is got some rolling hills, but it's not too hilly. It looks a lot like northern Louisiana, maybe even East Texas, maybe southwestern Mississippi
Okay.
is what I'm thinking. Um, the architecture all looks right, and one of the things I like, you notice when you drive through roads and you go by the bank there at that one end of town, you've got the Confederate Monument there,
Oh yeah,
and
let's go ahead that
this
direction.
this is 1899. It's really the 1890s when you start to see that stuff pop up. Um, and that's when you get the lost cause mythology come along, that the Civil War wasn't about slavery for the South, it was about states' rights and all this, and they kind of start kind of rewrite it, because I mean, let's face it, who wants to admit that your granddaddy fought in a war that was designed to perpetuate slavery, right? I mean,
Yeah,
so you've
it
done.
sounds a lot nicer if
And
it's about states' rights, because then
it sounds a lot nicer.
you can be the next American Revolution instead of
Right.
the people that kept people in bondage or whatever. I can't read that.
Right.
I'm guessing to our Confederate dead or something. We have those monuments all over the South, basically. All right.
They're everywhere, and what's interesting about them, I know a lot of people know this. Just about all of them. Now, the one on the courthouse square in Denton's different, but most of the Confederate monuments I've ever seen are always going to be facing north. And the idea is that they're faced to the enemy. They never turn their back to the enemy.
Let's see if that's the case here. So I'm facing north. All right, let me see. So this one. All right, that one's not the case. That one's facing west. So they
Right.
got one little detail wrong there, but I don't think we'll
Yeah.
hit them on it.
That's not something most people would pick up on.
Sure. I mean, but they're really good at picking up on small stuff, but obviously that's not that big a
Yeah.
deal. All right. So we always have in this game, we always have this Confederate. We have the Union soldier, and we also have the Confederate soldier always waiting out here begging for change and stuff like that. Was that I mean, we obviously have the Vietnam vet stereotype these
Right.
days. Was that a thing that happened or a stereotype from back then?
Not really. These guys, you talk about the Vietnam vets and how that war was very unpopular. They come home and they're kind of um, looked down upon. Most families with an older Confederate vet and the family are wind up taking care of their family member. A lot of these guys that don't have families that can't. Most of these southern states had Confederate veterans homes. I mean, Texas had one around Austin. Alabama had one down, I think, somewhere south of Montgomery. But the states put up money to take care of their veterans. Um,
And didn't
so
Confederate states, I know, so the Union, the national government gave pensions for Civil War service. Did in the individual states that they gave pensions for Confederate veterans? Is that correct?
yeah, yeah, I think some of them may have. A lot of them didn't have the money to, and what they did instead was pour that money into these veterans' homes.
Okay.
Um, but what's funny is the national government by I think the 1890s, maybe 1880s, were giving out pensions to Confederate veterans as well.
What the? No kidding! I didn't. I didn't know
Oh
that.
yeah.
Really?
Look, I got an interesting personal connection. So what? I guess my great grandfather was corporal in Second Georgia Cavalry. So he was with Johnston in North Carolina when they surrendered to Sherman. Well, he didn't surrender. He
Okay.
just got on his horse and went home. But in the 1890s, when they started giving out pensions for Confederate veterans, you had to have a document saying that you'd surrendered. So he got on his horse and rode all the way back up to Greensboro, North Carolina, because you had to go back to where the surrender document was signed, and and actually signed some papers saying, "Yeah, I surrendered," so he could get his money. In
No
other words,
kidding.
he wasn't going to surrender until there was some money in it, and then okay.
Wow. All right. So we
Which
got
my grandpa always said. Go ahead.
no. Go ahead. Right here we got the cotton bales. So obviously the stereotype is South,
Yeah.
all about cotton. Um, Before the Civil War, slaves picking cotton. That was the sort of stereotype of there. But it looks like here this is what it's all about still. Pretty much the case. Post Civil War,
Oh,
still all about
oh
cotton.
yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. Except now, okay, if you before the Civil War, if you own the land, you also own the labor, right? You own probably slaves to own it. Well, clearly you can't own your own labor now. So, and the South is cash poor after the war. All their money was tied up in slaves and land. So what do? How do you get people to work your land? And if you're a former slave, what do you do to make money when all you've ever known is agricultural work, right? Well, this is where sharecropping comes in.
So you
So
basically go ahead.
you, yeah, you work somebody else's land, And the way you pay rent, because you don't have any money, and this is poor blacks and poor whites, the way you pay rent is they get a percentage of your crop at the end of the harvest, and that's where the term sharecropping comes from. It's not a great system because you have to go into debt at the very beginning of the cycle just to have enough seeds, implements, mules, all that stuff to work with, and very unlikely that you ever make enough. The best most sharecroppers ever did was break even.
So basically, you are property, you have no property, so you've got to work somebody else's property. And the way I've always heard it is that, sure, these slaveholders, they lost obviously a lot of property with the slaves, but they're the ones that hold the land, so they end up making the money off sharecropping instead of slavery after the Civil War. So didn't really hurt them too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, they were hurt, no doubt about it, but relative to the poorer classes in the South and to their former slaves, they come out still pretty okay.
Okay. Well, one of the big things in the game is this rivalry between the Braithwaites and the Grays, and basically the Braithwaites, I think both of them are big plantation families, lost slaves during the Civil War, but now they're rivals. I'm not sure if they went into the details in the game, but I think it might have been one of them worked for the Union or something like that, or one of them was, I don't know what the whole deal with their rivalry is. I can't remember. But were there big rivalries like that in the South in real life?
You had some. Yeah, the big one that comes to mind is Hatfields and McCoys in what's today West Virginia and Kentucky. Yeah, you had some here in Texas too. Just up the road from where I'm at a little bit, maybe an hour and a half up the road in DeWitt County, Texas, you had the Sutton-Taylor feud. And some of that had to do with some issues from the Civil War. That's where, you've heard that famous Wild West outlaw John Wesley Hardin.
Oh, yeah.
He got his job. He got his start as a gunslinger, I think, for the Sutton clan.
Okay.
And so you had family feuds. Texas in particular was pretty lawless during Reconstruction.
Do you mind to help the bandwidth? Do you mind hitting your little screen off? Because if you can do that, because it'll help us with the bandwidth a little bit while Arthur gets shot over here.
I'm not sure how to do. How about that?
It's hopefully it'll get better. It's still on there. Oh, actually, well, I don't know. Hopefully it'll clear up. So this would be, I'm guessing, where type of family where the poor tenant farmers or something like that would live. Can you see this?
Yeah.
There you go. You got it.
All right, cool.
Would this be accurate for a small, I guess, tenant farming or?
Oh yeah.
Poor Southern. Would that have been slave quarters?
They're probably a little bit nice to be slave quarters, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Of course, this all depends on where you're at, what part of the South, and what and things like that. But slave quarters probably going to be, a one-room shack with dirt floors. You probably don't have much of a porch if you have one at all.
Okay.
So the ones you just rode through, it'd probably be a small, poor, but small land-holding white family.
Okay. Yeah, I think in the game it's one or two of the families are black and a couple of families are white. Would you have that where you would, the poor whites, poor blacks live together, or was that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What crop is this?
Sorry. Say it again?
No, keep going. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. What's interesting too, when you talk about segregation and stuff, the 1890s is really when Southern state governments put that system, Jim Crow, in place. A lot of people think it happens right after Reconstruction, and it doesn't. It takes a couple of decades, and what really provides the impetus for it is populism. So when the populists come along in the early 1890s, they're reaching out to poor black farmers and poor white farmers, right? So they've got the potential to be a biracial coalition. Well, that scares the hell out of Southern white Democrats. So how do you keep something, after 1896, when the populists pretty much die out, how do you keep something like that from ever happening again? Well, it's a strategy as old as time, divide and conquer. So you separate them. You segregate whites and blacks. You take away a black's right to vote. You scare the hell out of them with lynching and stuff like that. And that's how they did it. But way out, but in very rural areas, it would not have been uncommon to have white and black families, poor white and black families living fairly close together.
Okay.
They would have associated with each other when it comes to like crops and farming and that kind of stuff. They wouldn't have socialized with each other, but they would have, relations would have been fairly cordial.
Okay. Have you seen this part of the map? This is supposed to be like an old Civil War battlefield.
Yeah.
Would they have left these cannons just laying here after the battle?
Probably not.
Yeah, it seems like you could at least melt down the iron or something like that and make use of it.
A lot of times they were, of course, if you were U.S. Army property, they're going to go back and get that later. Confederate cannons probably, the states would have confiscated it, or maybe the federal government if it's a national battlefield park. And those started, I think the 1890s is also when you started the National Battlefield Park program. But nah, they won't just be laying around, because if nothing else, like you say, a lot of those cannons are brass, right? Well, you can melt that stuff down and use it.
Sure. Okay, well, let's go Saint Denis. So Saint Denis, I'm assuming the name in the game, and I think there's actually a statue in the town, is named after a saint, which is a thing that the French and the Spanish would do.
Yeah.
Whatever date they found a city, they would name it after the patron saint of that day. Is that correct?
Yes, and Saint Denis is the patron saint of France.
Okay.
Yeah, Saint Denis. Now, check with Abel, but I believe that's right.
Okay. See, my thought was that maybe they might have named it after, the Saint Denis that was famous in Texas history, the one that, we know
that's possible.
Basically got the Spanish to settle in Texas, but I don't know for sure. It might be just because they grab tiny things from history and they sort of put spins on them, like they have New Austin as a state instead of Texas or whatever.
Clearly, that's supposed to be West Texas, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. It could have come from either place. It could have come from Louis Saint Denis, or it could have come from the feast day. You know what?
Oh shit! My horse.
Ouch,
No, so I got a guy over here. He looks like he's killing a government agent, and he says, "I don't care if you're a census taker or a tax collector." Is that a general attitude you'd see in the South?
Definitely, there's still a distrust of the federal government. I think it varies from place to place. One of the things about the game is you're not going to see, like the Lemoyne Raiders, for example. I've not been able to find any evidence of any vigilante groups like that wearing Confederate uniforms.
Really? Okay. I was going to ask you about that.
Not that late. Okay. Now, obviously, during Reconstruction, you've got groups like the Ku Klux Klan, the Knights of the White Camellia. They're not wearing uniforms. They're out there, the League of the South. They're out there, covering their faces and such, but they're not wearing uniform. So this game takes place in 1899. By that point, you don't need something like that. Those folks and their descendants are in control of the state and local governments, right?
Sure. So
any things that are done usually with the imprimatur of the county sheriff.
So this one thing right here, they got the Klan in this game. The Klan, as I understand it, 1872 with the Enforcement Acts is going to be gone, and then again you got Southern whites getting back in control. So would you see the Klan like you see it in this game in 1899? Hold on, lad.
I'm not.
Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Okay. So
Yeah,
would you see the Klan like you saw see it in this game with the fiery cross and the hoods? Was that a real thing in 1899?
Not in 1899. So
okay.
Nathan Bedford Forrest disbanded the Klan in 1872, 73, because they'd largely accomplished their purpose at that point, which was ridding the South of Republican rule, or at least they were on their way to doing it. What we think of the Klan today, the new Klan, doesn't pop up till 1915.
Okay.
And so, 15, 20 years, of course, during the 1920s, they're huge, not just in the South, but in the Midwest. But 1899, nah.
And so that and the Burning Cross thing, that's from the book The Klansman. That wasn't a real thing, or was it before 1915 or whenever the Klansman
Yeah,
came out?
that Reconstruction Klan didn't do that. I don't think. I think that's a thing that came out of that book, The Klansman, which, of course, as you know, is what the movie Birth of a Nation was based on.
Okay, okay.
Which we had a U.S. President, Woodrow Wilson, had a screening of that in the White House.
What did he say? It was like history on lightning or like lightning or something like
Yes.
that. Okay.
See, Wilson, I think, had gone to school, not with D.W. Griffith, the director of the film, but he'd gone to school with Thomas Dixon, I think was the guy's name who wrote The Klansman. And Wilson was a notorious racist, born in Virginia, raised in Georgia. And yeah, he kind of bought into all that.
Yeah, he was raised actually where I was born in Augusta, Georgia,
Yeah.
home to the Masters, and me.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so you
You better listen.
yeah, but I like the Masters better than me though. The Masters is pretty badass. But so you got all the cotton and stuff here. Would Saint Denis be a typical Southern port city, or is this
Yes.
pretty comparable to what you would see in New Orleans?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
You'd see this in New Orleans. The wharfs, you'd see it in places like Galveston, Mobile, Charleston. Yeah, it's because cotton is still big business in 1899, and it's just, the labor system used to grow it. The problem with it is they grew way too much of it, which drove prices down, and then that brings a whole lot of other problems. But to most people in the South, if you owned enough land, you wanted to try to grow cotton because there's still money in it.
So all this is coming down whatever river this is, just like all the cotton be coming down the Mississippi.
Yeah.
Okay. All
I
right.
don't know. It looks like, of course, now I know what the French Quarter looks like today, but this part of Saint Denis to me looks like what they're trying to do is recreate that part of the French Quarter down by the market.
And would this be accurate from what you know about the French Quarter?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
look at the wrought iron balcony, the wrought iron railings around the balconies and stuff. That looks a lot like the French Quarter.
Now you got a Chinatown here. I think I'm about to pass through that. Would that be something you would see in a southern city in the 1890s?
Oh, probably not. The Chinese, by that point, are more of a West Coast phenomenon, although there's evidence they were out around El Paso, when they were building the railroads out that way. And they used Chinese labor in Mexico when Diaz started building the labor. It's good if you were going to find a Chinese community anywhere in a southern city, probably would have been New Orleans. Now I say that, but I've just recently learned this. In my hometown, Gadsden, Alabama, northeast Alabama, in the early 20th century, there was a small Chinese community there, and they originally showed up when they were building railroads through that area, and a lot of them stayed, and they did the stereotypical work. There was a Chinese restaurant, and they had a laundry service.
Yeah, that's what you see all the time when you're looking at old census records. Like I guess it's a stereotype for a reason or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, actually, I was going through old newspapers not too long ago. I ran into this thing where these Apaches supposedly attacked and killed these Chinese railroad workers, and I'm just thinking, like, what? I mean, that two different worlds, completely different worlds colliding right there. But then I later heard that, I didn't take it to the full extent, but I heard that it might be the railroad owner did something like, and he basically wrote them off as they'd been killed by Apaches, when in reality they died of, not proper care or something like that. I can't remember the exact circumstances, but anyway, that's just something I was running across. But
Yeah.
so you've got this guy here that you'll run into later in the game that's doing this radio-controlled boat out on this lake. I'm guessing that's Tesla, sort of an analog for Tesla.
Maybe. Doesn't he say he's Hungarian or he's some sort of Eastern European?
Yeah, which Tesla's Austrian-Hungarian, right? Or he's from over there somewhere.
Yeah, I believe so.
And I think he also had the radio-controlled boat that he would trick people with or something like that. Could be wrong, though. All right, so you're thinking this is pretty accurate?
To me, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. And then you have the rich area of town.
Garden District.
this is so you'd have the wealthy. This would be like maybe the cotton traders, something like that.
Yeah, or bankers or other your merchant class. And New Orleans is kind of like that. You know, the French Quarter back in the French and Spanish colonial days was where everybody wanted to live. And then when Americans moved in, they moved just a little bit west of the French Quarter into the Garden District. And to me, that's that rich part of town you were just riding through. That's what that looks like.
Okay. So this.
And yeah, you merchant class, bankers, that kind of thing.
So the game has Chelonians. They're meant to be this cult or whatever. One of the things that I understand, you know, like you think back in the 1800s, everybody's Christian. Anybody that's atheist or whatever is going to be ostracized. But there, you know, there were a lot of like millennial groups and like sort of Christian offshoot groups in the 1800s. Can you explain more of that? Like, that's just something I know on my periphery, and I'm hoping you know a little bit more.
Yeah, a lot of groups that today are considered, if not mainstream, you know, they're accepted, but they start off as these sort of millennial groups that think the second coming of Jesus is coming back right then. Seventh-day Adventists started out that way.
Oh, no kidding! I didn't know that.
Yeah, they started out that way. I can't remember now. I get confused whether it's Church of God or Church of Christ, but one of the maybe it's Church of Christ, but one of those groups started off that way, and then the main group broke away and became what they are today. But I know my grandfather used to call them Campbellites because a guy back in the 19th century that was predicting the rapture right then in like 1850s was named Campbell, and everybody he ever heard referred to him as Campbellites, and he did too. But you had all kind of wild groups. I was watching this thing the other day, and this was the wildest thing. I can't remember. It was on one of these shows like Travel Channel or History Network, but there's this group of folks out around Kansas City, and this guy, and apparently I looked it up afterwards. It really happened. So this preacher gets fixated on these verses in the Bible that talk about, you know, the blood of Christ, and when they talk about the you know, the sacraments, like, you know, eating blood, eating flesh, and the dude would actually go and like. He had little children in this group, and he would teach the parents, yeah, you need to suck their blood because that's what rejuvenates you. And they busted the dude. So, you know, like you say, we think of everybody back then as, you know, they're either Orthodox Christians or they play along with it, but there were some freaks.
So they would have the children drink the blood of the adults? Is that correct? Or
no, other way around.
Oh, my God, wow.
Adults drink the blood.
Like Blood Boys from Silicon Valley. You ever see that show?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
But I've been meaning to. Everybody says it's funny as all get out.
They basically have this young kids and they take their blood or so. It's silly, but anyway, keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But no, there were some really out there groups even back then.
Millerites. I always heard about the Millerites. Was another one.
That's another kind of doomsday cut. If you ever seen Poltergeist 2, you know, with the old guy,
yep.
God is in his holy temple. I think they're playing off the Millerites in that.
Okay. So here'd be another, I guess this is the Grays and the other one's the Braithwaites. This
is something I found interesting about. Go ahead.
No, this right here, I always thought that this was meant to be slave quarters, but you're saying this is way too nice probably for slave quarters. Yeah,
but they may have portrayed it like that in the game. Yeah, that's probably too big for slave quarters.
Okay.
You're talking about real small in most places. Now, again, it varies depending on who you are and where you are. And in some really big plantations, they had nicer slave quarters.
Sure.
But most of the time, they're living in one-room shacks with a dirt floor.
Sure. Okay. You were saying something?
Oh, when you were riding through the fields there, this is one thing I found kind of out of the norm. They're growing tobacco. You remember that part in the game where you have to go set their tobacco fields on fire?
Yep.
I thought that was a little out of place because if this is set in the deeper South, like say Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, they're not growing a lot of tobacco down there.
That's why I kind of have the feeling that's just jamming all the South together as much as they can.
Probably is.
Yeah.
Tobacco's more of an. I mean, there's going to be some of it, but most of it's going to be grown in Tennessee, North Carolina, Kentucky. Virginia. That's tobacco country.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so is it likely that you'd ride through a tobacco field and then ride into a swamp with Spanish moss hanging off the trees? I mean, I can't see it, but I agree with you. I think they're just Lemoyne is the South as a whole.
Yep. Yep. Okay. There's a part of Saint Denis that I kind of like where it's got the sugar cane growing too.
Yes,
That would be a traditional Louisiana crop, right?
absolutely.
Okay. That's one of the only places they can grow. I think sugarcane. It's if it freezes at any point in the growing cycle, it's kaput, and it takes like 2 years to grow it. So like the only places in the U.S. where it never freezes are like right around the coast. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, South Louisiana, we grow it down here in South Texas. Now, not where I'm at, but about an hour and a half south in the valley. That's a big sugarcane region.
Okay. Yeah, this area here. So you're from mid Alabama or what is it? Northern
Northeast
Alabama. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So this would
So
be.
where I'm from,
Keep going.
this would be more like the southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, southern Georgia, swampy. Where I'm from, it's Appalachia. It's mountains.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
It's hillbilly territory up there.
I was thinking that the Beaver Hollow area of this game. That's my guess is West
Right.
Virginia, but I've heard other people say it's more like the Ozarks.
It could be the Ozarks. It could be West Virginia. I mean, it could be anywhere in Appalachia, to be honest with you.
You consider that Ozarks Appalachia?
No, I don't. But when I say Appalachia, I'm talking about that could be anywhere from northeast Alabama all the way up Vermont. And what Beaver Holler looks like to me is, the southern Appalachia, anywhere between northeast Alabama, northwest Georgia, and say West Virginia.
All right, so this game we've got this brother and sister couple. They try to kidnap you. Have you met them yet?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Why does the South have that? Why is that a thing from the South? Is it just from that Burt Reynolds movie, or like what's the origin of that stereotype? Any idea?
I think there are some places in the South that way back in the day, so I'm talking late 18th, early 19th century, they're real isolated. So you get up into Tennessee, places like the Smoky Mountains, and you'll have groups of people in one little cove or holler, and they don't have a lot of contact with the outside world because it's really hard to trade back then. I mean, it's hard to travel outside of your area, and a lot of trades done locally. And there is some evidence, particularly in the Kentucky Appalachians, of significant inbreeding. I don't know if you've ever heard of this group of people in Kentucky called the Blue People.
Oh yeah, I love them.
Okay.
Blue skin, right?
Yes, they inbred so much that their skin was blue. And I think because of the isolation of a lot of mountain settlers, that sort of became a stereotype that, they're all either brothers marry sisters or first cousins marry, and there's a lot of inbreeding, and in some places there was.
So it's maybe like the fact the South is just physically bigger than the North, and so probably did happen more because there was more spread out.
And in some places you're real isolated, particularly in some of those parts of the Appalachians, like the Smokies, parts of the Alleghanies. You saw some of this. You see some of this in western Pennsylvania too, but it becomes a southern stereotype. But if I had to guess, that's mostly where that comes from.
Okay, so this town, this is probably one of my favorite areas of the game because they have that crocodile mission or alligator mission or whatever it is.
I like it.
So this is basically a black town. I think it's all the residents are black. Is that you would see that in the South, correct? Is that
Absolutely.
okay? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So once the Civil War is over, emancipation happens, and you're no longer a slave. What you mostly wanted to do, if you could, was own your own land and kind of work for yourself. You've been working for somebody else your entire life. And so in places where they were able to, blacks would tend to, if they had enough money to buy land, or let's say you had a benevolent former owner that gave you some land, they tended to gather there. So examples would be outside Vicksburg, Mississippi, when the war was over, Jefferson Davis basically and his brother Joe gave land to some of their former slaves, and some of them were very successful and made a lot of money.
And then that just developed into a town, basically.
Developed the town. In northwest Georgia, I guess maybe about hour or so northwest of Atlanta, there's a little town called Cedar Town, and outside of Cedar Town, there's a little. It's a ghost town now, but it was called Chubbville, and that was a black enclave. That's where a lot of former slaves lived. I don't know if you've heard of a couple of years ago, Georgia had a running back named Nick Chugg. I can't remember who drafted him, but he was part of that family. He grew up there.
Okay.
And you've heard of the Exodusters too. You know, the ones that left and went to Kansas.
Sure. The with the homes that were made of the dirt, whatever they called those things.
Right.
What was the story with that? Like, I honestly don't know anything else other than that. So would the federal government was offering free land in Kansas? Is that correct?
Yeah, it was Homestead Act. You know,
Okay.
Homestead Act passed in 1862, and some of these freed slaves took advantage of it. And they moved out to Kansas, and you know, they viewed it as like the Exodus out of the Bible, so they called themselves Exodusters. Had more to do with the word Exodus than it did dust. But yeah, there were black communities out there. I think one of the towns was called Nicodemus, Kansas. It was an all-black community.
Oh crap! I'm about to get killed.
Uh-oh.
So have you fought these guys in the game?
Oh yeah, they're kind of freaky.
Yeah, they are. I guess these would be voodoo, cold or whatever, something like that. Hoodoo.
Yeah.
So from what I understand, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, voodoo would be like African religions sort of brought over into this Christian nation, and then it's just sort of
Right.
all jumbled together. Is that correct?
Voodoo, Santeria, all that's, you're right. It's like African animism, sort of married with Catholicism.
Wow. Okay. And so it's just
So you see it. So what they did was they took the old gods from the old way of thinking, and they just, the Catholic priests come in and they say, no, you don't worship that anymore. Now you worship God, Jesus, but there's all these saints you can pray to, and they're like, oh, okay. Well, this saint's just like this God over here, and they just kind of melded in that way.
Man, this part of this area of the map's always freaky. I think.
I hate going through there at night because if you get off of that plank road, you're likely to stumble over a gator.
I know. Man, I know this isn't what we're doing, but man, one of my most vivid memories. We went to Florida on vacation. So, I lived in Georgia. We'd go to Florida on vacation, and we were just stopped at a pond. And I remember my mom just went off for like 10 minutes, and I just remember this gator coming out of a pond, and like I'm like, what the fuck? Why is SEAL Team 6 not coming out and killing this thing? Like the idea that these things are just all over the place just blew my mind. But they really are everywhere. I think even in Texas we have millions.
Yeah, we've got them out here on King Ranch.
Wow, no kidding. All the way down there. I guess that's something I never thought about. So that means there's a bunch in Mexico too, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Now, what happened? I mean, they were native here, and then I guess probably about around the 20s or so, they'd all been hunted to extinction. And King Ranch wanted to reintroduce them in the 1970s, for biodiversity. And they got about 7 alligators from the Brownsville Zoo. Brownsville Zoo had too much, and they introduced them out there, and they do great out there. Now, every so often they get out of control, and they've got to go hunt them and thin out the herd, but there's tons of them.
No kidding. Like whose idea was that? Whoever came up with that idea to reintroduce alligators should be shot. That's something that should not be introduced anywhere.
I've heard some people out there say that, but they mostly keep to themselves out there. They usually don't bother the cattle, and unless the cattle are stupid enough to get close to a lake where most of them are.
Okay. Here's this sugar cane. I'm assuming that's what that is. Yeah.
That is, yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna try to go to some of these bars in Saint Denis to see if we got some fairly accurate stuff in there. The dress, the clothing. You see anything completely off about the clothing? So this would be, I guess, a normal farmer.
Now that guy right there is probably dressed a little too well for a farmer. You ain't gonna be out there hoeing sugar cane with a bowler hat on.
Okay.
Uh, you might have a straw hat on. He's wearing a vest. You ain't gonna be wearing a vest out there hoeing sugar cane. But other than that, yeah, the dress of especially of the town folks in Saint Denis, it looks pretty accurate for the period.
Okay. Let me see here. And keep going. I'm sorry.
There's one bar you go to. You know the mission where you got the bar pulls you in and he wants you to shoot all the rats in there?
Yep.
All right. You know, that bar reminded me of Napoleon House. You remember Napoleon House, right?
And I remember we saw an animal there. You want to tell that story?
Yeah. We're sitting there having some drinks. I was about 2 or 3 gin and tonics in, and we looked up and there's a rat running across the floor. And, okay, well, all right.
So right there in the middle of yeah. When I played that mission, that's the first thing I thought of is this is
That's
very
exactly
accurate.
Yeah.
So the police force, this is one of the things I'm always curious about in the games is you think the police force would have really been like this back then, like all over the place? Like would they be every street corner? Is that accurate or is that
In a big city like that, depending on the neighborhood, yeah.
Okay.
And again, it depends on the city and it depends on the crime and that kind of thing. But I would have no problems, and I'm not an expert on policing in that time period, but I could have easily imagined New York having a very visible police force not New York, New Orleans having a police force like that.
Have you found the vampire?
I have not found the vampire yet. I got to do that.
I believe well, I'm not going to spoil it, but I believe it's right around this area where he's at. So that's one of the really cool things about the game. And I'm assuming vampires weren't real, but you know.
Right.
Yeah.
As far as I know, well, I don't know. You read that? You might have read the Vampire Lestat and the Vampire Diaries or whatever it was. Anne Rice. That was New Orleans.
Yeah, I read that history book, Vampire Diaries. So yeah, that one's good.
That's the TV show on WB, right?
Yes. Yep. You know anything about any of these vaudeville theaters?
No.
You don't? Okay.
Not much. Although this is period, yeah. I mean, you would have seen this kind of thing during this period of time.
Boy, I have you gone in and watched those shows?
Yeah, I did a couple of them.
I mean, I spent 20 minutes watching them. I thought the work they put in this game was pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
Okay.
I hadn't spent that much time watching them because I just enjoy hunting and killing people more. But.
Yeah, there's so much other stuff to do in here. Boy, I can't find the bar. I'm trying to find. Well, let's just talk about it in general. The bars. It seems like you have the stereotype of walking through the double doors. Somebody's playing a piano.
Right.
Or give me a whiskey, bartender, or whatever. I mean, from what you know, and I know you're not bar expert history, but does that seem accurate?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
And if you notice too that most of them have ladies of the evening frequenting them too.
I was gonna ask about that. I always am curious about the prostitute situation. Keep going.
Which, for this time period, probably very accurate. You don't really start to see a crackdown on prostitution until the Progressive era. The progressives that view that as a threat to public health and to public safety and order. And so, 1910s, early 20s is when you start to see a major crackdown on prostitution.
So this gambling, that brings up another thing. So I guess this goes. My understanding is that the Progressive era, so very, very early 1900s, that's when we start getting the ban on gambling. That's when we start getting liquor laws, no selling liquor on Sunday. That's a progressive thing, right?
Yes.
And so my understanding was the riverboats were a reaction to progressivism. Like this is a way to get around these laws by throwing the riverboats, in the river. It's not in any jurisdiction or whatever. So is the riverboat in this game, is it accurate or is that...
oh, yeah.
Okay, so you would have that before the progressive era.
I believe, yeah, you definitely would.
Okay.
I've often thought somebody ought to write a history of prostitution on Mississippi riverboats, and they should call it Boats and Hoes.
That's pretty funny. So
Maybe Tim Bridges can do that. I don't know.
yeah, I was actually thinking about having her on to talk about the prostitution situation in the South because
Oh man, she's the person on that. She knows that stuff.
yeah. So you would basically in the 1890s you'd be able to go into like especially the seedier areas of town and be able to find prostitutes fairly easily. Maybe I
Yeah.
should save these questions for her, but go ahead and tell me what you know, because
Well, notice you just rode by before you got to the Chinese restaurant. There was a building there that had some red lanterns outside.
yeah.
Might be part of the Chinese restaurant. Anyway, that's why they call those things red light districts. That's how you knew where the prostitutes were. They had red lamps outside.
Do you know the origin of that of the red lights?
Uh-uh.
I don't either. Okay, that's something maybe we'll find out one of these days. Maybe when Jen comes on, we'll ask her about it.
Yeah, she'll know far more about that than I will. But yeah, I think I believe there were even brothels in Denton up until about 1906, 1907.
Yeah, I remember her saying Sherman. There was a big prostitution house there or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The little town where I graduated college, I graduated Jacksonville State University in Jacksonville, Alabama. There's still, this is interesting, and it's a throwback to progressivism. They have fraternity houses on that campus, but they don't have sorority houses. All the sororities, they've got a dorm where all the sororities live, and each sorority has a different floor. And the reason why is according to a city ordinance dating back to 1905, 1906, any house in that town with two or more women living in it that are not related would be considered a house of ill repute.
Whoa! And that's still on the books?
Today, it's still on the books, and they don't have sorority houses.
You're
I
kidding
don't know
me.
why it's never been. I shit you not, my friend.
Like orphanages and stuff like that would count, or I mean, maybe there's got that's
Yeah, that's a
insane.
good question. I don't think they have any orphanages within the city limits, but that's why there aren't any sorority houses in town. They have a dorm on campus, and each sorority has a different floor.
Huh. All right. So actually, really, while we're on that, did you win the like a world trivia thing while you were at Jacksonville State, or was that?
We won the Alabama State Championship in, I believe, '93.
Okay. And then didn't you win?
We beat Auburn, Alabama, all those guys.
Didn't you win a bar trivia thing recently?
No.
I thought you came in second or something, or
Yeah, we came in second.
that was a state thing,
couple
wasn't
years
it?
ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was. I think that was the year we went to. It was in New Braunfels, but.
Because when I was bringing you on here, one of the ways I was going to introduce you is you're probably the smartest dude, at least for sure knowledge retention. You and my buddy from West Virginia are the two smartest people I know, and that's kind of we're talking about the South and stuff. That certainly breaks the stereotype of rural people we have, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
But yeah, you two dudes
Well,
are.
my parents weren't related, so.
There you go. That's that breaks the stereotype also.
Yeah.
Hey, good deal.
I appreciate that, but nah, I just know useless stuff that I can never turn into money.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, the obscure sports figures and things like that.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Well, you got any more thoughts on the game? Any more historical things that are wrong, things that are right?
I've given you most of my good. The things like the tobacco, I thought that's a little out of place. But most of this, I thought they did a really good job on. I mean, clearly it's not set out to be history. It's a game, and you got to make it fun to play. But I thought they did a good job of getting a lot of things right. I think the terrain is phenomenal. And the different kind of terrains you encounter in the game. And particularly in this section in Lemoyne, and like the old plantation houses and that kind of thing. I really liked it. I thought they did a good job on it. And like I was telling you earlier before we went live, I've beat the story mode, and I still just like to ride around and see new places and shoot people.
Sure. But actually, let me ask you about the gang. The gang, really quick. Were there? So the gang, Dutch is pretty. Obviously he's crazy, but he's kind of progressive in a lot of ways. Were there a lot of multiracial gangs like that gang with American Indians and blacks and
Yeah,
whites and women and was that a reality?
I think out west, yeah, you have some of that. There were some gangs in Oklahoma when it was Indian territory that were basically they newspapers would refer to them as bad whites, but they had gotten together with American Indians and they preyed on people. And I think out west, the racial issues are less important than they were, particularly if you're an outlaw and you don't care, you just want to get by.
Yeah,
You want as much money as you can.
if
So
you got to worry about real stuff like where to get your next meal and not getting killed, you don't have time to worry about race
right,
and that kind of thing. Yeah.
that kind of thing. So I think that's probably fairly, and particularly at this time, to turn of the 20th century, and when I first started playing it, I was thinking about the time period it was set, and I'm like, 1899. Do you have gangs like that way? And then I got to thinking, you know what? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the Hole in the Wall gang. That's this time period. That's 1890s. I think when did they flee and supposedly go to Bolivia? 1906, 1907. So it's so you still had some outlaw gangs at this point.
Yeah, that's one of the things. It's wrapping up at this time, which I think is the part of the reason I think they said it at this time period is because they want to include really cool guns and stuff that you might not have had before, and but also it's realistic because there is still some of these things around.
Right. I found that pretty realistic too. A lot of the weaponry that's period. The Carcano rifle, that's a I think an Italian rifle that was used by a lot of snipers and European armies use that. Matter of fact, I believe it was a version of that rifle that Lee Harvey Oswald used to shoot Kennedy.
No kidding, and it was the original version was around in the 1890s.
Yeah, and of course there were different versions of it later, but yeah, as early as the 1890s, the Italians were making that.
Wow.
And I think their sharpshooter units in their army in World War One, and I think the Austro-Hungarians as well were using that.
And then,
so I found the weapons to be pretty realistic.
And then people framed Lee Harvey with it by. I'm just kidding. No.
Oh, that's a whole other discussion for a whole another time.
I know. No, I love conspiracy theories. Unfortunately, I don't believe very many of them, but I love to talk about them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anything else? Any other closing? Well, one actually. Red Dead Redemption 2 or Red Dead Redemption 1? Which one do you like the best? Better.
I like the second one better, I think.
Okay.
There's the map seems a little bigger to me, and I like the whole legendary animal, legendary fish thing. Did they have that in the first one?
I don't think so.
I don't think they did.
I don't think they did.
And I'm surprised because time period wise, I'm more of an earlier 1870s, 1880s would be more up my alley. But as far as gameplay goes, I really like this one better.
Yeah, me too. I'll tell you, story-wise, I like Red Dead Redemption 1 better, but obviously the gameplay, I think in this one's a lot better. I actually went back and played Undead Nightmare, and man, the graphics. I mean, it's obviously not anything compared to this, but they really hold up. Pretty close to what you'll see a lot of modern games. So it's worth going back to for those who only played Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead Redemption 1 is definitely worth it, at least for the story. So.
Absolutely.
All right.
And even going back even further than that, remember the first one, Red Dead Revolver?
I've never played that one. Have you played it?
Oh yeah, that was back when you didn't have wireless controllers. That's how long ago that was.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was I think it was Xbox. Was that the original? Original, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was pretty fun, but I think this one beats all the others.
Some people think that Uncle is Red from the original Red Dead Revolver. That's a little conspiracy theory that the internet's got.
About that. He's a sorry piece of shit.
Yeah, but he's got lumbago. Leave the guy alone.
That gets him out of all manner of chores.
I don't even know what that is. Tell me what that is. Do you know what that is?
I don't think I know either. And it got something to do with your back or your spine.
I don't know. I mean, the way they make it portray is it's kind of made up, like it's just one of the just BS disease or something that didn't really
I
exist.
think it's a real thing, but we call it something different now. Like back then, they called it consumption, but then it became known as tuberculosis.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, we know about that with this game.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Arthur or John, which of the two do you like better?
Arthur before he gets sick.
Yeah, I think I still like John, but obviously these two guys are two of the best video game characters, I think.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, I like John too. It's hard call, but I like Arthur before he got sick. I'd like to see him be a little more ruthless, but that's all right.
Okay. All right, buddy. Well, thank you for coming on here. I think this has been I learned a lot. Hopefully everybody else did too. So.
Not a problem. This is a lot of fun, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate it too, man. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.